Alright, I'm back. I've got the four-wheeler supported up in the air. One thing you have to remember when you lift up these four-wheelers and you put jack stands underneath them, the shocks and the springs are what hold this four-wheeler up. So if you undo this bottom bolt right here and you pull this shock out of the way, this front end is going to want to collapse. So not only do you need to lift it up in the air and take the tires off, but you need to also support it some way. I'm using a crane. I have a crane here at the shop, so I'm able to do it that way. What you could do is use some jack stands in the center of the four-wheeler underneath like the front diff, and that will support it, so that way when you pull this shock out, this thing doesn't come crashing down on you. So like I said before, I mean, you want to be safe, and you want to get through this without any injury and without damaging your four-wheeler. So what I've done is I've pre-loosened some things, and I'm going to do the front a little bit different than the way the manual says. The manual says to remove the entire front shock, and that's not necessary. I'm going to do it a little bit quicker. It's just something I don't see the point in taking off the whole front shock when it's not necessary. So after you've got the four-wheeler up and it's supported and it's ready to go, you're going to loosen this nut and this bolt right here, which is 14 millimeter, and it's going to be really tight. It's tightened to close to, I'm going to say probably 75 foot-pounds from the factory, and it's used, they have Loctite on it, so it's going to take a little bit of effort to break it loose. Obviously I did this before the video just to speed it up a little bit, so you're not bored with watching me take nuts and bolts loose. Undo the nut. This bolt should come through, which will allow the shock to pull out of that perch and will allow this to drop down. This is only going to drop down about 2 inches. It's going to drop down about what the kit is. There's not a whole lot of play there, and you wouldn't want to try to force it any further than that because you can damage the front axle shafts or the CV joints. So you don't want to be prying on this. It moves up and down freely, and it will drop down to give you enough space in order to do the kit. Now you have this is your shock mount, and this is obviously your shock. And what you're going to be doing is inserting a spacer that's going to allow this shock to now be about this high, and that is how you achieve your lift. It's a real simple kit, and it's pretty straightforward. Now what I've done is I've already done the other side, and I'm going to jump over to the other side and show you what it looks like when it's complete, and then we're going to jump back to this side. And I'm not going to video the entire process just because it's hard to hold the camera and do it. It takes definitely 2 hands. You got to deal with some washers, and it's kind of hard. So I'm just going to show you the before and after, and then a little bit of all the parts that are needed for one side. And then you guys, obviously, if you get the kit, you're going to have the instructions, and you'll be all set. So what we're going to do now is go over to the other side, and this is what it looks like when it's installed. You have, now your shock is mounted into the bracket, and you have your nuts and your bolts. You also have some spacers that go in here because this bracket is wider than the shock and the factory bracket, and they do that simply because you have to have room to put your washers and things in there. So the tolerances are a little bit bigger than what they should be, just for the ease of installing the kit. So what they say, like I said before, is they say to remove the whole shock. As you can see, I did not remove the shock, and it's pretty straightforward. You pull the shock out, pull the shock back. You're going to start with the top. This bracket gets mounted to the shock first, and that's going to be bracket. You've got a bolt, a spacer, then the washer, your shock, a spacer on the other side. Push all the way through, and you put your nut on that side, finger tighten that down. Then this bracket you're going to push back down, and it's going to sit flush on here. You can see you have angles on these brackets. It's very, very important that you configure this and put this in the right way, because this bracket with the angle here, the support here, there's a cross support here, and here it keeps this in the right the angles proper, and that's a key. If you put this thing on backwards or upside down, I don't know if you can or not, but I'm sure you probably could. It's not going to work right. It's going to bind up, and it's just not going to work. So it's important to follow the directions and install this properly. So what I'm going to do is take a break here for a second, and I'm going to lay out the stuff for one side and show you what's needed to do just this right here. Be right back.